going on YouTube? So I got back from my Pismo trip, which was this last Saturday, and at the end of the trip, my backup Odyssey, which is actually going to be my daughter's once I'm really confident that it runs well, we were out there in the sand dunes and we decided to turn it off. And up to that, been working great. We did have a little bit of issues with it starting previously, which kind of works into all this, but for brevity, I'm just going to go with this part of the story. So anyways, we're out really far out in Pismo Beach at the very back end of the park, and we turned off the machine because we wanted to sit and chat a little bit before we continued on our ride. Well, my buddy Andy, who was driving this thing, when he went to start it, it wouldn't start. Didn't do anything, not a click, no nothing. And so if you've ever had this situation, some of you guys probably already know what's going on here, it's the neutral safety switch. So the Odyssey is set up that you have to have, obviously you have to have the key on here, right? And then you also have to have this switch set to run, which makes sense. But you also have to have this set to neutral, so it can't be in forward or reverse. Now, technically, this being a CVT transmission, it really doesn't matter for starting purposes, unless for some reason it was not running right, and if you turn it on, fired it up, and it just like over revved and then it would engage. So Honda did put in what's called a neutral safety switch. To give you an idea where that's at, it's actually on the transmission. And if you look down here, I know this is a little dark, but up here, this is the transmission shifter. And this here is the neutral safety switch. Now, you'll see that mine is not hooked up, and that's what feeds into the story. So we're out there, it's about 6 o'clock at night, it's getting dark, and I'm trying to figure out how in the world can I get this thing back because of the hills and climbs and stuff that we had. And so I talked to my buddy Derek, and he said that, well, you can get the machine started if you wire the two wires together that go onto the end of this, and then you got to ground that to something on the frame. And I didn't have a way to actually remove the wires cleanly, which was a problem. And so I ended up just ripping the wires off because I was kind of desperate at that point. These are just soldered on. It's kind of hard to see, but they're just soldered. And I set the wires over here, and so they're wired together, and then they're grounded to the frame, and this would allow us to get the machine running. Now, at the time, I didn't have anything to cut bare wire exposed, so I just had little tips exposed here, so I actually could not even wire these together. I could touch them together, touch them to metal, it'd get started, but there's no way I could leave these things connected at the time just because there's no exposed wire to work with, and I had no way to cut more exposed wire, and this plastic shielding is really pretty thick. So what that means is that my wires were disconnected. I'm going to show you. Like this. And again, there just wasn't enough to connect anything. Actually, you can kind of see that little tip. That's what I was working with, right? So now, the problem with this solution is that even though it got the Odyssey running, it thought that it was in reverse. So on these machines, if you're in reverse, it runs with less power. I guess that's some sort of a safety feature or whatever. In order for the machine to think that it's not in reverse, and I'm not entirely positive on this, but I believe that these two wires need to be crossed together and they need to be grounded in order for it to run correctly. So the end story of all that is that we basically had like a quarter throttle to go up these dunes and everything to try and make it back. So took a lot of riding. Eventually we did make it back, thankfully. Didn't have to go out and get a tow or anything like that. Minus the last little like 100 yards, which I actually had to tow this with that. And it actually worked, surprisingly. But good thing it was only like 100 yards. So now I got to fix this. And now there's a couple things that I want to talk about to explain what actually happened. And this is all because of my own buffoonery. So in a previous video that I haven't even released yet, that I'm going to have to go back and edit, I was showing that when you're checking the oil, so your top off
outlet here is right here, right? So what you want to do is you want to fill the oil up to this point when it starts coming out, and then usually you would just screw that in. But one of the recommendations is to actually overfill from that point about a half a quart. And so that's what I thought that I did on the video. The problem that I did though is that when I undid this, and again, I know you can't really see it. Here, let me get a flashlight. Okay, so the top off screw is right here. Nope, right up here. There it is. Yeah, it's still shadowed. Anyways, that's where it at. So what I forgot to do is I forgot to undo this cap. And so what happened was the oil wasn't coming out of the hole very fast, so I thought that it had already flowed down to that point. In reality, there's a vacuum in here because this cap was not undone. So there's already, this thing was already overfilled, which I did not know. I would not know because I just purchased it from someone else. I didn't know what they did. And so when I added another half a quart of oil, it actually took it from like this level, which is fine, and took it all the way up to this level, which is not fine. So at this point, we're riding around, and what happened was we got the machine started, which is okay, but as soon as we got out there, we ended up, oil started coming out of here, all right? And you can actually kind of see it's still a little oily and everything, right? And this, with oil in this little switch here, it prevented it from working correctly, which is why it wouldn't start. Real long story to get to that point. All right, so I ripped off the wires, and what I need to do is I need to resolder the wires to make it work. Now, if you're in this situation, there's probably a couple things you could do that would be better than me. I didn't know this. It was dark and it was hard to see, but this actually unthreads. Now, unthreads with just a 14mm screw. So where this wire comes in with a wiring harness, all the way over here, it comes into right here. Okay, so if I'd known this and I kind of traced it, I would have come here, disconnected this, and then I could have come over here, and with a 14mm, which I do not know if it's in the toolkit. I don't know I think there's a 10 and a 12. I don't think a 14 is in the toolbox, which is all the tools I had at the time. So this just unthreads like this. And then I could have unthreaded this all the way. And at this point, I have my safety switch. Now, whether I would have been able to, get this clean and dried from oil or not, I don't know. Even now, I'm not 100% positive that this is going to work. I'm hoping that the oil, because I left it sitting upside or right side up like this for a while, once the oil's out. But that's in a nutshell the issue. If you're having that no start issue, you could probably try pulling this off first and seeing if you can get the oil out, and then by manually doing this, you can maybe get it started. But do that before you start ripping off the wires. Now, since I did rip off the wires, what do I gotta do? I gotta solder them back onto this. I am not a very good soldering person, but I think there's enough meat here that I should be able to do this. So I'm gonna take this over to the bench and we'll set it up so you guys can watch that process. Okay, so I've removed the pigtail from the Odyssey, and there's a few things to note. One is a little bit of exposed wire. I'll have to kind of close that up, maybe with some heat shrink tubing. We also have this little deal in here. So this is actually hidden behind this larger piece of tubing. So I assume that this is original, and so we're going to make sure that we preserve this. I'm just going to probably secure it with something better than this, or probably reuse this, but they had electrical tape, and electrical tape after many years, it just goes bad. So what we got to do is we got to clean up these ends here, and we're going to solder them to there, and I have my soldering gun over there getting warmed up. So I'm going to do a little more prep work, and we'll come back and do the soldering. Okay, so I have my my harness here. It's not soldered on, but I did go ahead and put this back together. I didn't do that on camera, but just showing you what I did. I wanted to get rid of the electrical tape, but in order to make sure that this is sealed nice and tight, I ended up just reusing electrical tape. What I did do is I added some zip ties on the ends here and over here, and this will just help once the electrical tape starts to lose some of its stickiness, that it won't start unraveling from this end because the zip tie will be here. So I also had a little patch over here, so this wasn't cut or anything from the actual wires, but this black protective sheath was cut. So I just wrapped some electrical tape around here, and then the same thing, I just put a zip tie over it. There's probably a lot better ways to do this. I consider some heat shrink tubing and stuff, but because of the size of this, I couldn't get any into this spot. And honestly, this is fairly accessible. If I ever needed to repair on it, I could. So at this point, what I need to do is get this thing set up to actually solder. So we have our safety switch here. And I think what I need to do is just warm these things up and get ready to solder them. Oh, actually, there's one other thing I need to get. Okay, so the part that I forgot, there's actually two parts. There's this little boot, and unfortunately mine is just completely shredded. So I'm not going to be able to reuse this. There's just not much point in trying to. So I'm going to have to do something different than that. And then there's also this little back part. So this little back part actually goes onto the end of here. So you got to straighten these little prongs up so you can see it. And then it would actually just go right on like this. We'll bend these out of the way for the moment. But this goes in between, like that. And like that. I have to clean that up a little bit. There we go. Of course, now my other wires popped out. See if I can get these in without popping this off. No, I'm gonna have to pop it off. Okay, by far not my prettiest soldering joint. I think it'll get the job done though, which is what we're after. So, kind of ham-handed it. But we'll put some shrink wrap on this, and this should all stay together real nice and firm. And I think it'll be good for many years to come. Alright folks, so still working on this. The first time I soldered this on here, I had it correct. Second time I had it soldered on here, I had it incorrect, meaning that it would only start if it was in gear, not out of gear. I didn't realize that there was a polarity to this, so this looks really ham-handed, I know, but I don't know if there's any way to be able to tell. I don't see any actual marking. I don't know if that's a marking right there. No, I'm not sure if that's a marking. So I can't tell you that part, but what you do want to do is temporarily wire this up and test it before you actually solder. And the other thing is there's actually holes in these prongs. I didn't know that because it was covered with solder. But it's actually easier to stick the wire through the hole and then solder over that. That actually works pretty good and nice good connection. So anyways, if you're having to fix this like I am, Again, there is a polarity to it, so what you want to do is put it on your machine, temporarily wire up the 2 wires, and if it starts in neutral, you got it good. If it starts in or turns over in drive or reverse, then you know you got to swap these leads. So anyways, I'm almost done now. I'm just going to clean this up, wrap it up, and I should be complete. All right, so that wraps up the neutral safety switch. I did get it back in. I did have to reverse the wires. I think I already showed that in the clip. So again, my soldering skills lack a lot to be desired. It wasn't, I guess, that bad the last time that I had to do it because I knew that there was the holes on the tabs and kind of stuff like that. Again, not really clean, but it'll get the job done. You can kind of see what's going on here. So I think that'll, well, it's pretty dark. I know you can't really see that very well. But anyways, hope you guys learned something for that. If you guys enjoyed that, please give this a like and consider subscribe. With that, we'll have more Odyssey content coming your way next week. Thank you for watching.